Curt Christman, welcome back.
It is good to be back.
Hey,
Yeah.
we were making a joke at the beginning about how last time you were on was like episode 7.
Wow.
This is episode 50.
Wow, I was in the
53.
early days.
You were one of the OGs.
Back before you were...
Yeah, before we were so famous.
Before you were famous all around the county.
Yeah. And we were talking about the image quality and how different it's going to be. So we'll be able to see the contrast there.
Well, I brushed my teeth and everything. So.
Hey, well, that's baby steps. It's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a start.
Last time we were on, we talked a lot, or you were on, we talked a lot about, your growing up years, what it was like going through adoption and then the journey to finding your biological family, really, not just your father. And so really amazing story. And the traction that your message about the father's blessing is still, I think, one of our highest reels that was viewed by people, how valuable that is. That's so amazing.
Yeah, it's huge.
So when we finished that episode, we had talked about having you back on, talk about business and family and some stuff like that. You have a lot to offer, and I really enjoy talking to you. So welcome.
That's good. And it's the last time that you and I had face-to-face man time. We were fishing up in Branningham. I mean, we really haven't. We haven't.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
we caught a lot of fish that day.
Yeah,
that was pretty good.
Yeah, it was fun.
There's definitely something to having good quality time with people that you love and you love to talk to. So, what's new with you?
Oh man, yeah, it's family is growing, and we're lots of grandkids, lots of noise, lots of busy. So that's good.
That's good.
It's different. Cora and Hannah are living at our house right now because they're in transition, and so it's more noisy, more busy. But it's also this is good because we're still in our early 60s. We're not ready yet to, think we need
be empty nesters yet.
Well, we're empty nesters, but Corbin has said for years, when are you going to sell that house and move in with us? So this is kind of a trial run because we've talked about it. We've, and actually seriously talked about that at some point that would be something we'd do. And I can see it, I can see it. And we're very compatible with them. They're easy.
Yeah.
And, for sure. And so, we'll see what becomes of all that.
Well, that's a big transition, because you probably had, you had the big house, the big farmhouse, and then now
it's absolutely quiet.
It's full.
Now the upstairs is full of people, and at nighttime, and the downstairs is full of people in the daytime. So but it's good. It's actually interesting. I grew up watching the Waltons. I walked a mile every Thursday night to the neighbor's house in the dark to go see the Waltons. And that was you didn't have have the internet.
It was airing at that time?
And it was, sure.
Okay.
And so the other night, they're going through the Waltons, as a family. And so the other night, I'm looking and, oh my, I'm Zeb.
Right.
And just watching the family dynamics of here's the grandparents, and that was it's not totally uncommon now. People do it, but typically, people go to retirement home and, all this stuff. And to put 3 generations in a home, the valuable things that happen in that, you can't reproduce it any other way. We're not in charge of their kids. They are. We do speak up from time to time, and if, one of them needs a little guidance or whatever. And, but as a parent, when your grandchildren are there, you just, I'll say it this way, because not everybody lives like this, but you do well to remember they're not your children, so you're not responsible for all the stuff with them. And I told my wife one time, I said, because she was stressing about not doing enough for all the kids and the grandchildren, and I said, listen, you take vitamins, right? Yeah. How often do you take them? Well, once a day. Why don't you take them every hour upon the hour? Well, because they're a supplement. Yes, and you are a supplement as a grandparent. And that's the role, Give advice when you're asked, and be a blessing whenever you can, however you can, but you don't own it. You're not the parent.
That's a really good way to think about it.
God didn't give them to you to parent. He gave them to you via the parents to grandparent, and that's a different relationship. Yep. I love hanging out with my grandkids, and they come and they work with me, and we'll talk a little bit about that, and and talking about my business. But so we're in a little bit different stage right immediately. We'll see what happens. Cora and Hannah move on, or maybe we'll sell them the house, and
and then you become the in-law suite there.
Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty common in a lot of other cultures. Like it's really American culture. That's it. Like you said, it's a retirement home, or it's down the street, keeping a close eye on. But in a lot of other cultures, it's kind of just the expected way. Like we all kind of live in the same commune, the same home, and once we're done raising you, then you take care of us when we're older, and that's just the cycle.
Yep.
So,
and the I'm told that the elderly, and I don't know what the number is, if it's 10 years or 12 years, whatever, that end portion of your life, most people will spend on health and housing and all of that. They'll spend the greatest amount of money that they ever spent will happen in that period of time.
No kidding.
And, so here you are, you don't have a regular income, for most people, and it's, and you've got all this outgo, and it's like, I just see a lot of wisdom in taking care of. My parents took care of them, and, it was good. It was good.
The last time you were on, we already touched on how you spoke about the relationship with your father and how important that is with your kids, and how valuable that piece of what was missing in your heart you didn't really know until later on when he gave you the blessing, the father's blessing. So you spoke about the importance of telling your children you're proud of them. And I'm just curious how that practice has shaped your relationship with them and how you've been able to see that imparted to their children going forward.
Yeah. I say this tongue in cheek sometimes, but there's actually a lot of truth to it. When I grow up, I want to be a parent like my children are parents, because they're good. They're really good at it. And, watching them affirm their children, watching watching my boy's father, and I worked at it purposefully, but it's really true. When I grow up, I'd like to father like they do, just because they're firm. They're both very firm.
Yeah.
And there's times where they're like, they're getting one of their kids' face, and I'm flashing back to me and doing it wrong many times, and I start to cringe, but I watch, and they know the line, and they know how to speak life to that child, not just correction, but to how to give them the answer and give them the I don't know exactly, but it's like you give them the encouragement to move on and do better, and it's there are no perfect parents. God's the only perfect parent. So I think I said it last time, and I've said it to different young people. Listen, you're going to frick your kids up, and that's because you're human. You're going to make mistakes, but guess what? If you will say you're sorry, If you will acknowledge when you're wrong, look them in the eye, and just know that God will make up the difference. He really will. I've watched a lot of parents that struggle with it, and different times I'm like, oh man, this is not going to end well. And I'm always amazed at how well it does end, because I've had the advantage of watching infants who are now close to being grandparents. I've gotten to see that span with some of the, children that are friends of ours that had their children earlier than we did, and they're close to being grandparents. And I'm like, okay, God's merciful, and when we don't do it right, He works with us, and He works with our children. So, yeah, but it is definitely. Scripture says life and death are in the power of the tongue, and it says choose life. And so, when you correct your children, and when I watch my children give the correction, but we always say, anytime you're correcting, give a sandwich. And in the book of Revelations, we see an example of that where Jesus talks to the churches, and he says, here's some good things I see about you, and this is good, and that is good, and this is good, but listen, you really need to make some changes here on this thing. Oh, and by the way, here are some other good things. So you give them positives on both ends, you give them correction in the middle, and that idea is there's a lot of wisdom in that. Mm-hmm. I think that's part of why the book of Revelations is written the way it is. It's to give us, a good example of how to deal with our children, but also how to deal with other people in our lives that we need to, walk with and encourage and correct.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, you can basically apply that principle across anything: marriage, business, leadership.
Yeah.
Whatever. Coaching.
Yep.
Like you have to understand that when you're dealing with these issues or you're correcting somebody, you're dealing with a human being. And if you come too hard down on that person and they're not ready to respond well to it, mm-hmm. you could crush that spirit or whatever. And the same is true in the opposite side of the pendulum, right? So if you don't ever correct and you're too soft and you're too lenient, mm-hmm. well, then it kind of leads for a wandering person, and that's no good either.
Right. Because children especially, they want boundaries. They want to push the boundaries. They're going to go right up to the edge of that thing and see, how good is this fence? But they're most comfortable when they have boundaries, for sure.
Yeah. And there's a certain security, there's a certain development that really thrives under that kind of mm-hmm. environment.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's really good. We were talking a little bit before about incorporating your children into what you're doing, mm-hmm. Having them watch, having them learn. You kind of made that the supplement point too, and I really love that because it would be very easy for anybody, especially with certain personalities, to want to insert themselves into where they see there's an issue mm-hmm. instead of waiting to supplement. And I think that's super valuable. But some of the great things that offers is that you can have a relationship with your children and your grandchildren where they want to interact with you regularly. Mm-hmm. And you don't want strife between the parents and the grandparents, especially in a cohabitating space, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And because that will breed dysfunction. But for your grandkids who are living at your home now, to see the relationship that you guys have with Corwin and Hannah, mm-hmm. Your son and daughter, I think that's super valuable too, mm-hmm. because they can watch and relate to you. So in the broader sense, children are always watching us. They're always interacting with us. They're watching how we treat other people. They're watching how hard we work. All of these things. Specific to you, when you were raising your kids growing up, you had a business, and it was very important for you to involve them mm-hmm. in your business. So could you just touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. I think that stemmed out of growing up on a farm, and my dad also had trucking business, but he spent a lot of time with me on the farm teaching me. And, yeah, you hung out with him while he's working and he's giving you tasks. And I feel like I took that to another level. Tried to give my children responsibility as absolutely early as possible. Like my thought is when an infant can sit up comfortably and whatever it is they're doing, playing with this, playing with that, with our kids, I don't remember if I talked about this last time, but with our children, they would take a bath and they'd be playing in the bathtub and they got a bucket of toys. I did not pick up the bucket of toys at the end of the bath, and I didn't want my wife to either, because we didn't play with them. It's their responsibility.
Yep.
If they're able to pull toys out of a bucket, they're able to put toys back into a bucket, which means now you can start working.
Right.
You know, even when you got a toddler who, and at that point they want to do everything you're doing, everything. If you're unloading the dishwasher, inevitably they're going to start unloading the dishwasher. And so I didn't stop them. I'm like, oh, okay. If you're able to take, silverware was the easy one. Obviously, I'm not giving them glasses and that kind of thing. But silverware, if they could pull the silverware out, climb up on a stool or a chair and throw it in the drawer. They don't have to organize it. Just throw it in there. That's, 25 times I don't have to, and I can organize it quickly. It's not that complicated, So with our business, I just always looked for tasks that they could achieve. If it was, if they're real little and they can pick up something and carry it and I don't have to, good, let them do it. And it makes them, feel valuable. I actually was just thinking about this the other day because I had a couple of the littler ones at my shop for part of the day. And there was a couple different times where, there's something I could easily grab it, pick it up and carry it, but I involved them in that. Why? Because many things. They get to be a piece of the work, which means now they find value. And I thank them and encourage them and, good job, whatever, and that kind of thing. And as my kids got older, I gave them little tasks that they could do that actually did help me. I could move on to something else. And with that, they would peel the vinyl, the rubber off of a monument. When you sandblast, it's covered with rubber. And it was hard work. I mean, there's times where I do it and it's like, man, I had my kids doing this, but,
right, yeah.
And they got paid $1
Yep.
per side. And so they, could do that. They learned that, okay, I work, now I have money. Okay. That's, just teaching them that concept. And anything I think that you can get into children when they're early.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think Scripture shows us that. It talks about training children. It talks about disciplining children as early as possible. And that's up to each parent. You got to decide, right, what they can handle, what they will handle. And sometimes they help you decide it. We've got a big truck that we haul monuments on, and I was going to pull it across the parking lot at my business, and so my 12-year-old grandson, the oldest, I had him hop in the driver's seat. I said, I'm going to have you drive it across, and he looks at me like,
Are you sure about that?
Grandpa's lost his nut. He was like, I said, and then I realized, okay, I should just find out, is he, and he was like, I can't even really see. I said, well, it's okay. As soon as I could drive something, I did, right?
Right, yeah.
But he's more cautious. He's more, analytical, and so I was like, hey, you don't have to. And so we switched places, but I am a proponent more and more all the time of just let people try, especially things that they don't think they can do. Let them try it. Let kids try things that are just out there, because I don't want to raise children. I want to raise adults. So I'm going to give them adult stuff to do. And I'm going to expect adult results out of them way before it's time to expect that.
Yeah.
Because, what do they say? If you don't make a plan, you'll fail every time.
Yeah.
Or if you don't
plan to fail, no, how's it go?
Right. If you don't make a plan, then you're planning to fail, or
Right,
whatever.
Yeah.
It's
If you fail to plan to fail. There you go.
There you go. It's been a while since I've said that one.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. Or the other one is, if you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time.
Yep.
Yeah. And so, I would rather, and this is part of my personality, I'd rather see somebody fail multiple times and see them push through. I struggle with some of the grandchildren that their personalities are not, they've got perfectionist things in them and they know that that's too big for me, so I'm not going to even try. And I don't like that, because I have spent my life, especially in business, doing things that I knew absolutely nothing about. Absolutely. And you just go until you do. Go until you know. Or till you realize, okay, this is not for me. But at least you tried,
Right. Yeah, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
And that must have translated then. Kids need to learn how to be formidable in the world. And the only way to do that is by taking on formidable tasks and making that make you stronger.
Right.
And so what's your approach then with children or grandchildren who don't quite have that, like you were just mentioning, and maybe they just don't tackle the task because they don't think they can do it. So how do you, in a loving way and in a non-detrimental way, push them to learn this is kind of how the world works? It's kind of how you need to pursue the world,
I think just first of all, being careful about what they're able to do, or willing to do, I guess maybe is the best point. But sometimes I think you have to back off a little bit and find where they're comfortable, and then as they're winning at that, then start raising the bar a bit and making it more of a challenge. It's definitely something that you got to think about it. You got to be careful with it, and knowing how hard to push. And sometimes you push too much, and that's what the words "I'm sorry" for. And, you just humble yourself and work it out. You know.
Would you ever facilitate opportunities for them to kind of push that boundary a little bit? If you say something like, I want you to pick up this box and move it over there.
Right.
Oh, well, I can't do that. I'm not going to try to do that. All right. Well, maybe I'll help you the first time and then show you how to do it. Then you do it. Or is there steps that you would take in a situation like that?
I'm always raising the bar, always. Right. And whether it's and what was it? There was something the other day that was way too heavy, and I knew it was.
Okay.
But just because something's too heavy to pick up doesn't mean you can't move it. In my business, I'm working with rocks that are way too heavy to pick up. But you can't always use a lift to move it. Mm-hmm. Well, there are ways to move rocks that don't involve picking them up and carrying them, you know. And so, yeah, again, it was one of the younger ones, and I was like, just push one corner of it and get that corner ahead. Now push the other corner, you know, and basically walk it. So yeah, it, you know, ultimately they did it, you know, and I think they were pretty pleased. They were like, you know, oh wow, I moved that thing or whatever.
Yeah.
But even with other stuff, whether it's, we do a lot of artwork, and I've got some artists in the family, and haven't turned any of them loose on monument artwork yet, but definitely sat the oldest one down here within the last year at a computer, and I told him, I gave him like a couple of pointers, and I said, now I want you to design a monument. And he's the one that doesn't just tackle things he doesn't know. And I was like, he said, well, how do you do it? I said, you know what a monument looks like. I've showed you a couple things. Just do it. I'll be back in a half an hour. And he figured it out. You know, yeah. It wasn't, you know, we're not going to sell that monument, you know, but, right. But at the same time, what he did, you know, had some value to it in just learning those little skills, you know, on the CAD program. So, you know, and he asked me, oh, can I, you know, because he'll be there working with me, and can I go design a monument, you know? Yeah. Yeah, sure, go for it.
Yeah, and you don't know what like interest that sparks for the direction of their life as a whole.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Exactly, yeah.
So you talking a lot about business and incorporating your kids in your work. How are you able to do that? Because by modern standards, men go to work. Yep. You know, women go to work, and kids either are in school or in daycare or at home. How is the dynamic for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, is that for everybody? If I'd like to say, yes, it is. I don't care if you're the president of the United States. And our current president has involved his kids a lot, which is, I'm not going to get into that, but I'm going to tell you there's value that I see there in that. Actually, did you see the clip of Elon Musk and his about a 4 to 5 year old with him in the White House on his shoulders?
I actually just saw a picture yesterday of the White House press secretary, I think it's Carolyn Levitt, with her baby in the Oval Office. Standing next to the president, talking to the president while he's working on something. And yeah, it's interesting to see that.
So I operate heavy, not construction equipment, but I operate overhead, a lift and, sandblast machine and all this stuff. And I was thinking about it today because I had 2 of my grandchildren there. I have a big truck. I have a forklift, and I was actually moving monuments with the forklift, and the oldest of the 2 grandsons, which is quite young, and I had him hooking up monuments for me on a hook so that I could get them into the shop. And I've been around farms all my life, and farm accidents and accidents where, you know, parents or grandparents have actually run over a grandchild. And I've thought this through because in my business there is a lot of that in our shop area where you're moving equipment around, you're doing this and you're doing that, and you can't do that stuff if you aren't. You can, but you're gonna regret it. But even when it was at home with my kids, I never moved a piece of equipment without knowing exactly where everybody was. There was times I was tempted to, I'm pretty sure that he's over there. Well, if you're pretty sure, you're not sure.
Right.
You know, and so there were times when it's inconvenient and it slows down your day. And I would stop and I'd holler to the kids, I want everybody up on the porch. Nobody move off the porch. And then I watch the porch the entire time that I'm trying to move a piece of equipment. And so, yeah, obviously it's not practical. You know, an airplane pilot, kind of tough to take your kid along to work. Although, I guarantee you, where there's a will, there's a way. And yeah, should your kid go to work with you every day when you're, doing all that kind of stuff? No. But are there times when you could have them involved, factory worker, that's doing the same thing day after day? There's businesses that have a bring your child to work day. At least do that much, because the value of them seeing what you do, that food on the table didn't just happen. We don't just go to a store and take it home, but I will say, if you're self-employed, you set the standards to a degree. Corwin doesn't take his kid. He's self-employed, but he doesn't take his kids on every job, because there are times when it's not professional to do that. And we have that. When we have monument people, or people are buying monuments, and we're not going to have the kids in the office when somebody's there grieving and trying to buy a monument at the same time. However, there are times we have had the kids there. So you kind of, if you can involve your children in whatever you do, they're going to learn. They're going to learn, how to handle people, how to look somebody in the eye, give them a firm handshake, all that kind of stuff, right? But yeah, and not everybody has the freedom to do all of that. Where, yeah, we're a little bit overboard and on steroids sometimes with that kind of stuff. But
yeah, bubble wrapping our kids.
Yeah, exactly. And where if my kids call me and say, "Hey, can I drop the boys off? Are you too busy?" Nope, I can't think of any scenario where I'm too busy. Yeah. I've got it. Yeah, I have work I got to get done, but you know what? I would rather have them there and waste 2 hours in a day. I can get up tomorrow 2 hours early and make up for the time if I have to.
Yep.
But I can't have them with me all of my life, and they're not going to want to be with me all of my life. So when they want to, I'm gonna soak it for all it's worth.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yep.
Because I know it's just a good thing.
Yeah, I'm going through that myself. I like to get my things done, so that makes it hard. If that's your mindset of, I know what I have to get done, I know how long it's going to take me, I want to get it done, and then you have little girls running up to you. I've very much, and I think it's a testament to the podcast in a lot of ways. I don't know if I would have thought about it quite the same without having people who are fathers come in and say, "Look, you're going to regret the times where you didn't say yes," and have them tag along in the task that you're doing. It'll slow you down. It might be a little bit frustrating, but you don't get those moments back. You just don't. You won't regret saying yes every single time.
Yep. Nobody gets to the end of their life and says, "Geez, I wish I wouldn't have spent so much time with my kids and my wife. Why didn't I work more?" Nobody. It doesn't happen. I was very blessed to grow up with a dad who was self-employed. We had the farm, made hay with him, hated it at the time, all the different things like that. But one of the other jobs that he had, or businesses that he had, was he trucked cattle from farms to the sale barn. And I rode for hours and hours in that truck. And one of the cool things that was, Dad was a preacher. He knew the Bible. And when I wanted a Bible story, it was like pushing play on a tape player or the CD or whatever you do today, click and play.
Yeah.
But I would say, "Dad, tell me a story," and 20 minutes later, I just got a concept out of Scripture from, David killing Goliath and who knows whatever, And as an adult, when I read the Old Testament, I was like, "Oh, I've heard all this before." Yeah, because Dad told me those stories, and he was a good storyteller, and so, and I like telling stories, so I try to, but it's just having that give and take, and especially telling your life stories, the things you've been through, and that just there's such value in all of that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things that I've been able to take away so far, just from talking to people and having guests on the show, is all of those little life lessons that I don't want to be 55 learning for the first time, or 65 learning for the first time. I can tap into their experience right now and implement parts of their growing up or their experience that I think would be valuable for me and for my kids and for my wife. I really like what you said about like involving. So generations before, it was like 12-year-olds plowing the fields with tractors or younger. And that was just the way that it was. Mm-hmm. And nowadays that's like unheard of. Like you can't even walk down the street from your house to town without getting in trouble.
Right.
Jordan Peterson talks about, Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about allowing your kids to do dangerous things carefully. Very important for their, their brain makeup and for their mental development. And I always thought that was so fascinating, because it's not like a recklessness, right? It's not a just go off and do something dangerous and whatever. It's more like if you don't try the monkey bars by yourself, doing it carefully, you'll never do the monkey bars. Right. How would you facilitate that with your children or your grandchildren now? Seeing something they're doing that's kind of maybe a little bit dangerous, but doing it in a way that will increase their development versus pull back on it.
Right. Yeah, one opportunity we have with our business, we have a shop, and so there's a lot of stuff happening in there, and a lot of things like I don't watch them every minute when they're there with me, and I hear the collective gasp. But no, I can't do that. I'm working, but I do. One thing I do is I sit down and listen. There's rules. Mm-hmm. There's rules, and like one of them is we don't run at the shop. You don't run, and if you do, you're going to sit. You're going to sit until you're sick of it, and you're just, because there's too many ways to get hurt. But yeah, I might have shared this last time. Go way back when my oldest, who will be 40, when she was little girl, and I was on dairy farm, and I would take her to the barn with me, and I would purposefully set her down and tell her, don't move. I'd have no reason to do it except that this is going to be a training moment. And so I would set her down, I'd walk around the corner, and I'd watch. And the moment she moved, zoom, I was back there and in her face, and like, listen, Daddy said, do not move. And I would train her like that. And that, ultimately, it just was kind of the base of and I do it now with the grandkids. I'll give them a task that they can do, and I give them also tasks that are just a bit much. And then I know that, okay, this is something I'm going to watch. I'm going to watch and see, and I'll step in and help them, or, whatever. We have good friends that introduced us, actually, and we met at their wedding, and they had children 4 or 5 years before us. And I remember watching Ezra, who was on your podcast, and I remember, here's Ezzy, little snot-nosed kid standing on a chair at the sink with a sharp knife in his hand, and he's cutting apples, and his mother's right there, and I'm freaking out. I'm thinking,
how old was he, you think?
2.5.
Really?
3. No more than 3. There's no way he was more than 3.
Yeah, so you were sitting there like...
And I'm like, he's going to decapitate himself. Well, first of all, the chances of him hurting himself seriously were pretty slim. And I watched it happen, and I didn't like it. But when I had kids, and all of a sudden I'm like, why not? Why not? I mean, okay, it wasn't razor sharp. It's a paring knife. If he slipped and hit his hand, his little, his little hands aren't putting the kind of force on it that are going to cut off a finger, and he wanted to cut his apple, and his mom was like, go for it, and she was there, she was watching, and I really learned from that. It's like, because most people would say, yeah, no,
that makes me, that's like pucker factor. It's like cringy a little to think about my 3-year-old doing that.
Yeah. But you know what, with that kind of stuff, if you really want to if you want to use that for a training thing, okay, start them when they're young and give them a plastic knife.
Right. Which was likely what had happened. It wasn't like the very first time, you think? Okay, well, all right.
I would say that wasn't his first time using a sharp knife. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah.
But either way, the thing I think I learned was, like you're saying from Jordan Peterson, is do dangerous things carefully, because that really is the rest of your life. If you're going to succeed, you're going to do dangerous things, whether they're physical danger or financial danger or, whatever. But if you do things carefully, I think about when I was a kid, there were no extreme sports. But the kids of my generation, they're really the ones that introduced the baseline for extreme, like motocross. What those guys now do with a motorcycle in the air, flying at 100 feet in the air, and they leave the motorcycle and they connect back to the motorcycle and safely land, and we all cheer as if, oh yeah, that was wonderful, great, and if you really stop to think about what they just did, it's like, oh my goodness. It's fine, I think, to mention a name because nobody's going to know the name anyway. Chet Norton could ride a wheelie endlessly on a motorcycle. We had never seen anything. The closest we came to that was Evel Knievel, which is a name most people don't even know anymore. He's gone on to glory now. But like, he used to jump cars and buses, and it was... did
he try to jump the Grand Canyon?
He did.
Okay.
He did.
See, I know my stuff.
Yeah, there you go. Good. Good job. But Chet Norton could ride that thing for miles down what we called it, the Kiter. It was a road going from where we were to the Pennsylvania line, and he would do that, and he that kind of stuff now is like, geez, if you can't ride a wheelie endlessly, what have you achieved?
Yeah, you're not in the business. Right, you're not in that business for sure. Right.
But it's all that kind of stuff. And there's lines. People cross lines all the time with that kind of stuff. And everybody has a line that they won't do. And there's lines that aren't wise. These free climbers that are hundreds of feet up on a rock face, because the adrenaline that they used to get when they had a rope on doesn't work for them anymore. So now they're, because there you're flirting with, it's not.
Yeah, it's a reckless. That becomes more of a
right. You're going to die.
Yeah,
you're going to die.
The death rate for those guys is not good. Alex Honnold.
No,
he's the guy that free soloed El Capitan.
Okay,
but that's what it is. It's an adrenaline thing. For whatever reason, the way his brain responds to it, it's like
I rock climbed when I was younger. I went to a rock climbing school, and I real quickly, because I did it at Beaver Camp. That was part of what we did was, it was an event for the kids. And I realized real quick, this has a lot of addictive qualities to it. And I understand why there are people who are addicted to that, that or any other extreme sport, because, it's something about that adrenaline that's like...
grabs you.
Oh yeah,
yep.
Yeah. It's right up there with meth and all that. With drugs. It's just
dopamine spike.
Yeah, it's not
dopamine dump.
It's you got to know where the lines are, and
With kids, do you think? Are you familiar with James Clear's Atomic Habit book? It's a New York Times bestseller.
Okay.
I don't know for how long. It's one of the best in the last 5 years. Anyway, he talks about habit stacking and how, if you're trying to lose weight, okay, tomorrow make sure that you get this amount of protein. Then the next day you get this amount of protein and an apple. And then you get this amount of protein and an apple, and then you get something else. And how that affects the way that you operate on a daily basis. It kind of sounds like what you're talking about with children is like skill stacking. Like if you're going to be cutting with an apple with a knife, probably you start with a plastic knife.
Sure.
Probably then you go to a paring knife. Then you go to something else.
Yep.
And just like what you're saying, with skills along generations, that's what you get. That's why these guys flipping up in the air wouldn't have been able to do that on motorcycles 100 years ago.
Right.
Well, it took somebody to go up a hill just regular one time and then down. And then, okay, now we can stack onto that skill.
Sure.
With children, Jordan Peterson, when he was talking about doing the dangerous things carefully, it has to do with emotional and psychological development. And specifically what he's talking about is the zone of proximal development. And that means kids learn the most and the best when they're doing those difficult things, when they're kind of on high alert, but doing them carefully. Mm-hmm. And that's when they learn the best. Mm-hmm. So super interesting to think about.
Yeah, for sure. And I, again, back to my phrase, I didn't want to raise children, I wanted to raise adults. I would give them things that I knew they couldn't really do, but you give them instruction, but you also hold their hand in it. And, sometimes they think they've accomplished it and you're bravoing them and, you're the one that did it. Yep. But, it's parental deceit. I think, I don't know what the term would be, but, if you can give kids things that are too big for them, at some point they're going to reach it and it's no longer too big, and it's, the other thing is, people don't realize how intelligent and perceptive children are. And a lot of times, they call them helicopter moms or hover moms that, they're not going to let anything happen to their child and, don't try this, don't try that. I beg of those people, help your child fail. Help them fail. Help them do something that's too much. It's too big, because at some point they're going to reach it. And I watched a short the other day, and it still boggles my mind that there's brains like this. There was a child who was, it was a girl. She's sitting up. She's confidently sitting up. She's able to maneuver, but that's young. It's not 2 years. She was given these little octagon stackable toys that each one is smaller than the other, and they're all different colors, and they were spread out in front of her. And this child reached and got the biggest one, and then reached and got the next one and stacked it. Okay, you got lucky. Then she got the next one and stacked it, and the next one and stacked it. She got the next one and she went, nope. She didn't say nope, but she put it down. She reached someplace else and got the appropriate one. Now, that is developmentally way beyond. But I think we need to realize that there are children that are capable of way more than what we will give them credit for, and so, or a chance to, and so that's why, for me, I'm always, with children especially, push the boundaries. One of the things that I do in my work is I do artwork on stones with a vibrating Dremel that's got either a diamond tip or a tungsten carbide tip, and it's fine art on black stone. And I do it when we set up at fairs. I always have a stone there that I'm working on, and people, it's a draw, it's a hook. to get people to stop and talk, and and then we can talk to them about monuments or whatever. And one thing that I love to do, especially I can do it when it's a big full scene, and everybody thinks, oh my goodness, what happens if you make a mistake on that stone? It's, you just keep drawing. You draw over top of it. It's not that as big a deal as what people think, but we'll let them think that because they pay a really good price for what they get. And
right.
So anyway, but what I love to do is little kids will come along. And when I say little kids, I'm talking about middle schoolers, early high schoolers. They'll come along, and most of them walk by, but the ones that stop and they look at and start studying what I'm doing, I soon realize that, oh, this is somebody that's got an interest in art. So then I'll start engaging them. Oh, you enjoy art? Oh yeah, and they, draw. Well, what's your medium? I draw, or I paint, or whatever. Well, I've done this many times, and I'll say, why don't you draw on this? And their mothers are freaking out. They're like, obviously this is your business and it's money, and what if they screw up? Because I've had people, all of that. I'm like, no, just look. I said, you're going to draw grass. Grass is just little lines from bottom to top. You're just going to draw grass. And most of the kids are like, oh yeah, they're excited to do it, and they'll do it because I want them to taste it. I want them to taste that several things. First of all, that I was looking at this, and if they have interest in art, they really want to get their hands on that instrument and make it happen. So somebody gave them a chance, and the other thing that I'm trying to do there is somebody believes in me. This guy don't even know me, and he believes in me. That when I look back as a child, the people that believed in me, and there wasn't a lot of those experiences, but there were some. I've never forgotten them. I've never forgotten them. And it's amazing the effect that it has on children when an adult, says, you have value. You have value. And here, you try this, and yeah.
Amazing to see what can happen when somebody's encouraged.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Or how starving people are for encouragement, and how much further they could go, further than they ever thought, with just a little bit of you can do it.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. The voices the other way are loud and strong. And I think we need to, with our children, with our grandchildren, any of the children around us. That's one of the reasons I've always wanted to engage with my nieces and nephews is they've got value, and I'm going to make sure that they know they're valued, and that they're ultimately God sees them, and they're important to Him. That's the ultimate message that I'm wanting to get across is you're okay. You're okay, whether you think you are or not. And yeah, can change a person's life.
Yeah, or a generation. Sometimes it takes a little encouragement for somebody to be courageous, and then see what happens in the world, in their life.
Yeah.
You touched a little bit about, and I'll try to quote this. I'll try to paraphrase it good. Help your kids fail. It sounds counterintuitive, but that is true, because failure breeds resilience. Resilience is a character builder. You need your character to be strong to face the world,
right,
instead of insulating yourself
right,
from the difficulties of the world.
How many adults have you watched in your life that don't know how to handle disappointment? Nobody trained them. Nobody taught them. That's, you're talking about what I see with my children and their parenting. They're all, they caught it. They caught it. Because like when my kids would come to me crying because somebody hurt them, I never went to figure out who did it and who do we dole the discipline out to. First thing I did was say, well, this is an opportunity for you to forgive. And what I'm watching now, a lot of times with my kids, they'll be like, well, you go back and work it out and let me know how it goes. And I'm talking little. They're learning it real little, and because most adults don't know how. They have no idea how to handle conflict, and they'll, what ends up happening is they carry unforgiveness, which turns into bitterness, which literally can physically mess you up. And, learning how to handle conflict, how to get humble, but also how to, hey, you offended me. And, that doesn't, the end of it doesn't have to be this terrible thing and separation of ways, being able to say, yep, we screwed up. Talking about learning how to fail. I've told this so many times, so I don't remember if I talked about it last time, but I called my basketball coach and I called my soccer coach here about 7-8 years ago and just said, thank you. Because here's some things I learned. And my soccer coach, I said, I don't think you were setting out to teach me how to fail, but you did. And one of the drills that we had in soccer was run in place, and he would blow the whistle, and you had to fall forward. And he said, and while you're falling forward, I want you thinking about how I'm going to stand up. Not once you're on the ground laying there sprawled out. When you start falling, start thinking about how you're going to stand up. And I said to him, I have applied that to my life in marriage, in raising children, in my business, is when I'm screwing up, start thinking about how are we going to make this right. And we don't dwell on the screw up. Yes, we want to learn from that. We've screwed up monuments. They're expensive. It costs money. But we're also not going to sit there and blubber about it. We want to learn how to do it right, and we hope we never do it again, But at the same time, we're not going to dwell with the failure. We're going to dwell with the success. And if we didn't succeed the first time, the next time, well, that's a success. Good. I mean, obviously, if we're failing and we're losing money and we're losing business and customers and all that, okay, we need to get serious about this. But part of the cost of life, whether it's business or whatever, is failures are going to happen. I can't even think of what would be the right, but
how do you respond?
Well, how do you respond? And let's benefit from it.
Yeah.
So that a failure is not a move backwards, but failure is actually a move forward. I'm gaining as I fail.
It's a part of the process to succeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe it's Thomas Edison had these hundreds of times of not creating a light bulb. And, somebody called it failure. And he said, well, I learned one more way not to do it.
Right, which is a success, actually.
That's success, because now nobody else has to do that. Yeah. I figured that out. That don't work.
Now I know one thing that doesn't work that I don't have to revisit.
What's amazing to me, too, is the number of products. I think Post-it notes are one of them, that it was a mistake. It was not enough adhesive for what it is they were doing, but they realized, oh, this has value. It sticks. It unsticks. It sticks. It unsticks.
Finding value in the failure is something that is very hard to do in the moment because
you got to humble
failure
yourself.
hurts.
And it's painful.
Yeah.
Hurts my pride. Hurts my pocketbook sometimes.
Hurts direction sometimes.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It can disorient you. It can shake your foundation. It's like when you're the differentiation I have here is learning to fail versus learning how to fail. Right? So if you're learning to be a failure, like if you're constantly doing something just so that you can fail, well, that's disruptive. That's not going to help you. Right. But if you learn how to fail successfully, then you will understand that the mindset behind the failure is to then push you another step forward.
Right. Yeah. and it's maybe another term for that is turning failures into successes. And, you know, again, the Thomas Edison thing, I can see somebody else headed in the same direction. I can lovingly put my arm around them and say, hey, I was trying it like that one time too, and it didn't work. Just letting you know, if my failure can help somebody else out, hallelujah.
Another level of value.
Yeah.
Another layer, I should say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you have also run a successful business, and I want to get into a little bit, just changing gears into what it was like starting a business with no money, no capital, in a field that you were not educated on, and what were some of the learning curves therein?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I knew at 10 years old I wanted to be in business. And the only way I knew it, I can't explain it, except it just came out of my mouth, talking to some other people, and said at 10, I want to have my own business. I'm not going to work for somebody else all my life. And that focused me. From that point on, everything I did, work-wise, I was always looking to either own the business or starting my own. So much so that in my early 20s, my conversations often were, I'm going to start a business, going to start a business, going to start a business. And especially with my one friend, and he would say, well, what are you going to do? Well, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to do food service. I'm not going to do logging. I'm not going to do farming. I've tried all those, working for somebody else, and I don't like that. And so he just said, why don't you sell monuments? There's no monument company in Lewis County. And that idea started to percolate. That's the only best way I can say is inside of me, that idea just kept coming to the surface. And talked a lot with my wife. We prayed about it. And one fortunate thing that I had was, so my friend that gave me the idea, he also gave me a book that was a magazine for a monument company, a national monument company out of the South. And he had sold monuments out of this book. And he said, I've sold monuments out of that book, a few of them. And he said, it's not something I really want to do. And, but he said, you could do it. It's pretty simple. The price is in there. Here's your markup here's what you would make out of that price. That's the ultimate price. And you're going to make a percentage. And my thought at that point was, well, I'm enough of a BSer. I think I can talk to anybody about anything, so that how hard right. could it be, to sell a monument? But we were living dirt poor, had a job that the house came with, our food came with it, utilities all came with it, with the job. So we were cash poor. We had a place to live and all of that. We had our basics, but didn't make very much money in a week. I think I was making, this is early 90s, and I wasn't making $125 a week. So to start a business, how do you start a business? I don't know how to start a business, but I sat down and I started writing out a plan of how a business should function no matter what it was. And now I would think you would say, well, here's the core values. It's probably the right word for it. So I wrote that out, got done looking at that, and I was like, that's the family farm. I don't want to be a farmer, and I didn't know that take out the word farmer and put a lot of different things in there would fit in that same set of core values and that same, concepts of how you're going to run a business. You can do it. So I've got a book that I can sell out of. And again, I have no experience. I don't know I don't even know what the word marketing really means. I really didn't. I didn't, somebody said marketing and I'm like, market, yeah, and I did. I had to, what I had going for me was I knew how to ask questions. So even like that, I just started asking questions. We scraped together, and it seems funny now when people are making, 15 to 30, 40, 50 bucks an hour. We scraped together $20 or ish, something like that. Bought 500 business cards, came up with a business name, haven't done anything yet. Come up with a business name, Lewis County Monuments. And people today don't know what a classified ad is, but in a newspaper, you can take out a classified ad, golf clubs for sale or whatever it is for sale. Took out a classified ad, monuments for sale. Call this number, whatever. And that was our
marketing.
That was our marketing.
It's marketing.
I didn't know it was marketing. I just knew it was a classified ad, and it was letting people know that I was in business.
Yeah.
So whatever that amount was, we think it was around $20. We don't remember, and here I bought 500 business cards. And in my mind, I thought, how will you ever get rid of 500 business cards?
Yeah.
Vision the size of a pinhead, just
Right,
couldn't imagine,
Right.
could not imagine, and now, Christian has his own business cards. I have my own business cards, and I don't know how often we go through them, but we do, but it was a stretch because we were like, I don't want to waste that $20. We're going to need that. Yeah, I would expect that it'll bring a return, but what if it doesn't?
Mm-hmm.
And you just have all this stuff in your brain. Lo and behold, I got a phone call. This Curt, yeah, you sell monuments? Never sold one, but yeah,
Sure do. I'm the best one you'll ever
sure
find.
do.
Yeah.
And that was a wild experience because you don't know nothing, absolutely nothing. I like to tell this part of my story because I believe that anybody could start any business, anywhere, anytime if you got to put money into it, $20 is a good place to start at.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be a whole lot easier now.
Sure.
To do what I did, Facebook won't cost me nothing.
Right. Yeah.
YouTube. I mean, it's just endless, the possibilities now. Those things did not exist 34 years ago. They didn't exist. And so, started following the obituaries. You didn't go online. There was no online. You got a newspaper and you looked at the obituaries and would reach out to people and did some of that. Used to send a sympathy card. I hated that with a passion. Mm-hmm. But we just did the little simple things that what they took was time. They didn't take really much for money. And we didn't try to look successful. I've watched a lot of businesses in my 34 years of business in our town. I've watched probably on an average one every year or every other year have started up and have not made it. And my premise, what I have witnessed is probably the number one reason they didn't make it is they went into debt. Business idea, it's a great business idea. I've watched them. There's stuff that they could make it with. Business idea was fine, but what they did is they borrowed themselves into looking successful.
Interesting. Yeah.
We've got a local business that I just talked to him the other day, and he's been going close to 20 years. And I said to him, do you remember when you first started and I come in and I told you were going to make it? And he kind of remembered. I said, I knew you were going to make it, because when I walked in and I looked at your counters in your shop, and I realized you made them. Looked at your sign out front, and I realized you made it. The businesses that failed spent $4,000, that money that they didn't have, on a sign out front, and brand new tools and brand new tools are great. I love buying tools.
Yeah.
But people try to look successful, and some of it is they're trying to be successful, and they don't know anything any better than borrowing to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And
throwing money at your business doesn't make you successful.
No.
Right.
No. Being successful and throwing money at that, there's success in that, I think.
Mm-hmm. Right. Once you're established, once you're successful, kind of stepping up to that next level will bring more success.
Right.
Right.
I think for me, if I'm talking to a young person that has interest, or, if you've got a parent out there that they're like, man, my son seems to be good in business, and how could I get him starting a business?
Work out of a garage.
Yep. The story we hear over and over and over and over. Yeah, started in our garage. Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, that's a good way to be successful, or started out back, or,
that's how you started.
Yeah. That was part of my business plan, was to have my business in my home so that I could be with my kids, because we're going to homeschool. And so I'm there, I'm working there. And yeah, I used to haul monuments wouldn't fit in the door, because the door went into what is now our bedroom, and the people that owned the home before us, that was their bedroom. Mm-hmm. And that was our front office. And in the wintertime, I would have monuments inside. Well, they didn't fit in the door. Well, now what do you do? I don't know. I don't know what to do or how to do, but you just start figuring it out. And eventually you figure out that if I can horse that monument around on a cart that would fit through a door and turn it sideways, I could get that in there. And I'm looking and thinking, geez, how much do these monuments weigh? I don't want to have my monuments in the basement come spring,
Yeah, right. Yeah, you don't want that. That'd be bad.
And I'm not an engineer. I don't know what will work. So I go down and I look at the ceiling, which is the floor to my basement, and I realize, 3.5 inch wide, joists running there, and they're every, 16 inches. Yeah, they're pretty strong. They're not, they're going to be able to take it. Plus I'll put the monuments over close to the wall, and I know that there's a post over, but I just did all that kind of stuff. You just kind of figured it out.
Yeah.
And the reason, some people say, well, what were you putting monuments inside for? Because where I live and where my monuments would be in the wintertime is 4 or 5 feet of snow. You ain't seeing no monuments. And I mean, it's hard to sell monuments in wintertime, because in the North Country, people don't go outside and go shopping except for absolute necessities. Mm-hmm. They don't go shopping for a monument in the wintertime. But I also wanted to be faithful. And if a customer did show up in mid-February in the middle of a snowstorm, they want to buy a monument, there better be one there that they can see. Mm-hmm. Whether they buy that one or not, but at least they got something, because people want to touch and feel, right? So, But yeah, we didn't have money, but what we had was the ability to dial a phone and ask questions. I would dial, like when I first started, where do you get monuments from? I had no clue.
Yeah.
Where do you start? Back then you could call 1-800, I don't remember, but I think it might have been 444 one something was business directory.
Okay.
I'm sure it's not the right number, but anyway, somebody had told me there's a business directory, not a because you would do that if you wanted information and you didn't have it in a phone book. You just called the operator.
Yeah, you didn't pull out your smartphone and had the World Wide Web at your fingertips.
And be able to actually look at the business that you're going to do business with and study them there, and look at Google Earth and all.
Oh man, yeah, unreal. Yep.
So, but I remember calling business directory, and I said, I'm starting a monument business, and I don't know where to buy monuments from.
Help me.
Right, exactly. That's what I was asking. Help me. And they said, well, I said, so I need some numbers for monument manufacturers.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, okay, yeah, I think I've found some. I said, well, give me the one that looks the biggest. like she's going to be able to tell, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But what she did, she got me Rock of Ages, who owned the quarry in Barre, Vermont, the highest quality granite in the world, and they are a massive big producer of monuments. Yep. And everybody in Barre, Vermont back then, there was probably 30 different monument manufacturers in Barre, Vermont. Now there's only a handful, but they supplied all them with their raw granite to cut and polish and all that. And called them up. And what I didn't know was they franchised.
Oh, okay.
Because I didn't know what the word franchise meant. I had no idea what it meant.
Yeah, how would you?
And so,
if you didn't know what marketing meant, you definitely know what
didn't know what franchising was. I told them who I was and what I wanted to do. I'm starting a monument business, yada, yada. And the lady said, what's your zip code? Why do they need my zip code? I don't know. But anyway, I gave them my zip code. And then I started getting an education. And she said, we already have a dealer in that area, so no, we don't want to do business. I wasn't as bold back then as I would be now, but I got bold at that point. I didn't know that they thought I was trying to become a dealer for them.
Oh.
All I knew is that they make monuments. I want to buy my monuments from you so that I can sell. But they had another dealer in our area. That's why they didn't want to do business with me. But it ticked me off a bit when they said they didn't want to do business. I'm thinking, why wouldn't you want to sell monuments? So you're in the business of selling monuments. So I said, well, who's your biggest competitor? And they said, Rulu Granite. I said, do you have their phone number? Sure. They gave me the phone number. I called Rulu Granite, told them who I was, what I was trying to do, and they said, hang on. We're going to let you talk to Gordon Gilbert. Gordon Gilbert was an old retired guy who wouldn't go home. And he knew the monument industry from beginning to end. And he was exactly what I needed because he became the dad that I didn't have to teach me how to do what I needed to do. Mm-hmm. And so I talked to Gordon, and I mean, he was wonderful man, and knew the monument industry, like I said, but he would talk to me, and
just a business mentor through and through. It's important.
And he'd call me up and say, we got a special on whatever, and I'd say, Gordon, I don't have any money to buy stock. And he'd in his Vermont brogue, Curt, you gotta buy granite. You can have holes in your socks, but you gotta buy granite. If you don't buy granite, you don't have any to sell. I know, Gordon. I know I need to have a display, but I don't even have enough money to buy monuments to put in a display. I didn't have it, and I wasn't going to borrow money to be successful. Fortunately, we had another monument company that Gordon put us in contact with. He said, you talk to these people and they can give you information and whatever. And so talked to them and went down and watched what they did and all of that, asked a lot of questions. And at one point, somehow communicated with them as we didn't have a display and we didn't have money to put into a display. And so they said, well, you know what? We've got a lot of monuments around here. Why don't we send you some monuments and you can use them as a display, and then when you sell a monument, you just pay us, what we paid for it. And so, yeah, that was great. Well, then they said, how many do you want? And I said, well, I think I can get 5 on the truck. Okay. So they sent our first display. They sent it along with us, and we set it up, and man, was that ever a good feeling. We were a couple years into it by then, But to be able to have our own display and made a nice area by the garage and put down mulch and, made the display look nice. And yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. Cool story with that is years later, the guy that gave me the idea to get into the monument business, who was a funeral director, his name's Sven Miller. You ought to have him on sometime. He's
Sven,
S-V-E-N.
Can't imagine where he's from.
Yeah. Well, he's from Lewis County, but
Well,
but they started a monument business about 12, 13 years ago, and I said to them, listen, somebody helped me out with a display when we started. Let me bring you, they're down in Pennsylvania. I said, let me bring you monuments so you can use it as a display. Same deal. When you sell them, you pay us what we paid for them. And so we did. We went down there and set them up a display and
networked a bit.
Oh man, did that because we struggled financially so hard for the first 8 to 10 years, really ish, to be able to get in my truck that had a lift and take these monuments down there and help them and set it up and all of that.
Pretty neat.
It's
probably emotional too.
It's emotional, definitely was. And I realized, I'm successful. Because not only have we been able to feed our family, keep clothes on their back, now I'm able to do what somebody else did for me. I'm able to do that. And we were already good friends with Sven and Lori. And but it definitely strengthened our relationship. And now when we get together, we talk shop and yeah. They'll come up and spend 2 or 3 days, and Sven a lot of times will come to the shop with me, and
nice.
the whole day.
Yeah.
I'm working on monuments, and he'll go in and talk to Christian, and pick his
right.
brain, and it is to do something that worked, and you started succeeding at it, and then to be able to share it. And that's one of the things we've done is started a YouTube channel showing people how we do monuments and all of that. And monument people tend to be, here was another word I heard in the monument business, and I had no idea what it meant, proprietary. When I first heard, I asked somebody a question about something they did, and he said, well, that's proprietary. So I knew it was a no-no, whatever it was I had asked, but then I had to go home and look up what does proprietary mean, and it's whatever's personal to me of how I do what I do, and it's which there's
just a fancy word of saying like you can't. I won't let you in to know how I do what I do. Is that it?
Exactly. And see, I am a citizen of another country. It's called the Kingdom of God. And in the Kingdom of God, Scripture says, freely you received, freely you give. And so, because any information I got, I asked for it. Somebody gave it to me. Somebody offered it. I learned it, whatever. And if I can give it away, it's just going to keep the cycle going. Mm-hmm. And to me, my successes aren't just the things that I've done, but my successes are, if I can help somebody else be successful, huge win. Huge win. I don't have to get any money for it. I don't have to get any recognition for it. It's just to be able to watch somebody else make it. That's just, just like with my kids, to watch them work with their kids and do well in their businesses and that kind of thing. And you just look back and say, yeah, I got to be a part of that, and that's just absolutely satisfying. Absolutely satisfying. Yeah, that's one of the things I enjoy about coming and talking about this stuff is hopefully somebody will hear this old guy and say, oh, well, I guess if he could bumble through, I can bumble through. Good. We'll bumble together.
Yeah, and then help other people bumble together.
Right,
yeah.
exactly.
Right.
Exactly, yeah. for
I
sure.
love that. I mean, especially from a business perspective, everybody wants to make it fast. There's no delaying gratification. It's, if you want to be successful, you have to look successful. It's just not the case. Like you said, you hear all the stories of everybody who started in their basement, in their garage, and just kind of made it by and made it through. And then, we're able to, now you have bigger trucks and you have a facility that you guys work out of. And that didn't happen for a decade longer, and that's the reality.
25 years before we had the building.
25 years. Yep.
Yeah. We're in our 34th year, and the building's paid for.
And the building's paid for.
The building's paid for. We a friend owned it, and we paid him a down payment, made a payment to him. We hope to have it paid off in 10 years, and that was my hope anyway. And within 7 years, we were able to do it. And we have equipment in there that is good equipment, and it's working well. And and we don't owe any man anything.
Mm-hmm.
I knew we were at a level of success that was, well, for me, was very desirable. In talking to one of the funeral directors that I knew, he talked about how when they would have to, on sad, rare occasions, have to do funerals for infants, they never charged. And I remember marking that in my brain. I thought, when I make it, if somebody comes in to buy a monument for an infant, they're not going to pay. And when we were able to do that, and Christian might have even talked about that when he was here, and they lost a baby and miscarriage, and he did a monument, and but he started. That was part of the catalyst too. Was like, what? From now on, if somebody comes in, we have a certain style that we offer, and this is free, and but it's no hallelujah to us. It's just that, again, it's that you give because you were given to, and it's just like the monument company that let us have a display. I mean, they literally trusted us at the time with, what probably cost them $4,000 or $5,000. They trusted us with those stones, and it was years before we sold all 5 of those. So it's yeah. Scripture says it's more blessed to give than to receive, and it couldn't be more true. Yeah. Do we like things? Sure. We like things. We like money. We like success. We like all that. But when you can sow into somebody else and watch them succeed, oh man, that's just like, yeah, I walk into pretty much every new business that I see in Lowville or in Lewis County. I walk into them as early as possible, and if I can buy something from them, I do, whether I need it or not, and I start chatting them up and finding out a little bit about them, and I try to encourage them up one side and down the other, and I just tell them, listen, you stick with it, you work hard, you're going to make it. I know you will. And when you get discouraged, just push through, because we did it, and it works. You just got to stick with it. Because usually most people, if they're willing to start a business, it's because it's something deep inside them. It's a passion. Mm-hmm. And that's a pretty good indicator that you're on the right track.
Right. And the courage that it takes to step out of your comfort zone, do something that you're maybe not an expert in, or that you're going to be learning on the way. Like I have a lot of respect for people that will do that instead of just staying in the status quo, never taking any risk, never jumping out, never doing anything adventurous.
Yeah.
And not that there isn't a place for that too. I mean, I'm not criticizing people who need to do that for their lives. Like, if you need that security and you need that for a lot of good reasons, by all means, for sure.
I didn't realize that people were different than me. I just figured, why wouldn't honestly, I was like, why would you go work for somebody else? Why wouldn't you just start your own business? You can. I did it. And not because I did it and I'm so great. I did it because, listen, I was second in my class from the bottom. There was one kid that had a worse report card than me. And, there was no way that, from the academic standpoint that I should succeed. But I was willing to work hard and don't take no for an answer and push forward,
Yeah.
But yeah, we're not all made to be entrepreneurs. It's, we need people in all these different things, from service industry to factories and all of that. And for me, it's no longer the ultimate for everybody would be to own their own business, because there was a time when I would have thought that.
Right.
Because it
worked for you.
Because it worked for me.
Yeah.
What I realize now, and if I'm talking to a young person who's trying to find their way, I always go through this scenario. And I'll say to them, listen, if you could write your own story, what would it look like? And almost every person knows what that story would look like. Mm-hmm. Almost everybody. And I will tell them over and over, listen, that's probably the place to start. And whether you end up there or not, more than likely that's where you're going to end up. Mm-hmm. Because you already have it in your heart. Yeah. And I think God put it there.
Yep.
I think he put it there. Or it might be the path that you take to get you over here. Mm-hmm. You might head in that direction, and ultimately you're going to make a right turn, but you never would have made the right turn if you didn't at least go somewheres.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing is, if you want to succeed in anything, go somewheres. Go somewheres. And whether it's marriage, relationships, with other people, or learning something, your mother is an inspiration. She's like, yeah, I'm going to learn, She already had some, in school with instruments, but she has pushed herself and and, and when she started feeling like I ought to start a bagel shop, she just did it.
Yeah.
She asked a lot of questions, did a lot of research, stayed up a lot of nights and didn't sleep, and, trying to figure these things out and be concerned and all that. But if you want to be successful, go somewheres. If it's not the right place, you'll make a turn and you'll find out where the right place is. You know, most people, and I believe this is true because I've watched it over and over again. Most people have no clue what they want to do until they hit somewhere around 30.
Yeah.
That decade of coming out of school until you get to 30 is
figuring
things out.
Yeah.
It's figuring things out. It might be the Thomas Edison thing. You might have to figure out a few things that you don't want to do.
Yeah.
Good. Successful.
Or they don't work.
Now you know. Right. Yeah. Exactly. That didn't work for me. And I learned 3 things from that.
Yeah.
And so I'll carry them forward with me. Yeah. Good. It's not failure.
Yeah. You're what you're talking about. And in that stage too, it's understanding the why, right? Understanding the why of what you're doing or what you want to do or who you want to become, and the how becomes secondary. How do I do it? Oh, no problem. If I have the why figured out, then the how is going to figure itself out, and I'm going to put in the work to do that. Very interesting.
Yeah.
And I feel like with people who are entrepreneurs, particularly, they're the ones out there doing that. They're in the arena. They're out there, blood, sweat, tears. I'm going to figure this out. And if it doesn't work for me, I'm going to go figure it out somewhere else.
Yep. And sometimes it's the wrong steps that lead us to the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Right.
and I've seen that enough too. People that they're willing to try, and sure enough, eventually made it, and it had nothing to do with all those things in the beginning, except for
Yep.
the life lessons that they learned. You know, but yeah, and it's success is not about spending money. It's about to look successful. It's about doing, and it certainly helps if you can surround yourself with encouraging people that, even if they're, they don't always know the right thing to say, but they're encouraging you.
Mm.
That goes a long ways.
Yeah.
That goes a long ways.
And that's a message for people that are reaching out. It's also for a message for people that have made it. Like if you made it, encourage people who are reaching out, trying to get there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The other thing that I had, and I've watched those that don't have it, and that is, if you're going to get in business and you're married, you have got to have your spouse saying, you know what? Not I know you're going to make it, because they don't. But saying, you know what? We'll try together, and if we fail, we'll fail together.
Mm-hmm.
And that gives you to know that there's somebody that's saying, I'm with you, one way or another. Not going to condemn you.
I'm not running away.
Right. I'll go with you, and sure, let's see what'll happen. My wife she's not an adventurer. To me, I get juiced up. If I'm wandering into the unknown, I'm getting juiced up. She is not. But, and I told her, I said, we're not gonna borrow money. It's got to pay its own way. Because for her, if I would have said, yeah, we're going to start this, and it's going to cost $150,000 that we're going to have to borrow to get things going. Mm-hmm. No, not happening. Because it just, she would not have been comfortable. But because the one thing in going step by step, little by little, tiny little steps forward, you always knew that McDonald's is always hiring.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
Walmart is always hiring. Somebody, someplace, if this doesn't work, you can go get a job and go.
Yeah.
Especially if you haven't gotten yourself in a bunch of, debt, it's not a detriment to start over. That is where the struggle comes, when people think, again, try to look successful, to be successful, and it doesn't work. And so, and I did work like while we were, especially the first 3-4 years, I worked other jobs. I worked logging in the woods, and I worked for a company called Service Master. Went in and did disaster cleanup and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Man, I was making $5 an hour doing that. That was yeah, $5 an hour. Wow. That's $50 at the end of the day. But it was, it didn't dig us out of any holes that we felt like we were, wallowing in. But it helped get us along. And it, the hard part is I had people that would say, 3 years, you get through the first 3 years, you're gonna be fine. Mm-hmm. And then you get through the second 6 years, and then somewhere around year 7 or 8, for us was like, oh, this is working. Mm-hmm. It's not working great, but it's also not working. Yeah. We're going to be okay. We're not getting rich, but and I don't care whether I rich. I'm rich. I've got people all around me that I know, and they know me, and I love them, and they love me. So I'm rich. Money doesn't really matter. I've always known, once I got going, I always knew that I'm not building for me. I'm building a little bit for Christian, for the next generation, but it's that next generation that is going to have, if they want it, they're going to have an opportunity to step into a fully functioning business that's got all the ducks in a row, and it's a platform that they can grow from.
Mm-hmm. Stepping off shoulders, kind of
Stepping
idea.
off shoulders. Yeah. Like we could go in multiple directions with our business within that industry, in what we would call the death care industry. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of things that could be done, and that would supplement to it, and all of that. And so, and typically, our business, the memorial business, typically will go 3 to 5 generations.
Okay.
That'll be in that one. Sometimes longer, but if you build it right. Sure. Part of the problem is each generation has got to have their own sweat and cuts on their hands and all of that in order to appreciate it.
Yep.
I tried to make it work for Christian to get into it and be enough of an issue of facing different things that the value was not in what the business is worth. The value is in, we sweat together to do this. And,
I like that.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. That's well said.
So yeah, and if the next generation wants to get into it, I tried to be very careful with my kids. I tried to never put the expectation on them that they would get into the business. Mm-hmm. Because that I've seen, and that's not healthy.
Right.
It's not healthy. Yep. But if they did, hallelujah, good. That's great. Yep. That's great. But only if they really want to.
Yeah, that's good.
Which Christian at 14 said,
I want to.
This is what I want to do with my life.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm supposed to.
Yeah. And
there's been times where he's thought, maybe I would like to do something else. And every time as he, starts looking at it and praying about it, he's like, no, I'm sticking with this. So that's great.
That's it. Yeah. Well, it's the next generation, and hopefully that sets up for his kids and what they want to do. So.
Yeah. Yeah. But. And the other thing with that too is what I don't like in family businesses is when the founding father, grandfather, when they put expectation on how it's going to be done when they are done.
Right.
I don't like that because I think
you have to transition to be a supplementer after that. Right.
100%.
That's exactly
100%.
What you started at this episode with,
Yep.
Knowing your role and knowing when it's time to supplement versus take over.
And if at some point I back off and Christian says, well, we're going to change directions, hallelujah, go for it.
Yeah.
Go for it. I'm, because at that point it won't be me carrying it.
Yep.
It'll be him carrying it. And we actually carry it together now. We're in a partnership. I don't believe in 50-50 partnership. So we have a 49-51, because somebody, if push comes to shove, somebody's got to say, okay, well, here's where here's the end, or whatever. But yeah. But it's
great.
It's been a great ride.
Yeah, I guess so. It's not over.
Great ride. No, it's not. It's not over.
Yeah, that's great.
No, I'm actually. I think I'm coming into the highest earning years that I'll have.
Yep.
Most of the time we've lived with less because we've been anything that we could possibly not live on got dumped back into the business.
Okay.
And where some businesses are going to build that in 4 or 5 years and
reinvesting.
Which that's fine. Some businesses can move a whole lot faster. Yeah. It's just different. It's just different, But Monuments
cool.
in monuments, everything is slow. That's fine because that fits.
A lot of business is that way.
Yeah.
You know, you would think that instant success is going to happen and growth is going to happen so fast. It just takes time.
Well, it's like Walmart all of a sudden came on the scene.
Yeah.
Right. And then you
For
look back and you realize that, Mr. Walton did a lot of stuff before he
was
got
in the
to that.
arena a long time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A, I look at them. I love their story.
Yep, same.
And, Truett Cathy, and an interesting thing with him, Truett Cathy at the end of his life was doing the very same things that he did in the beginning of his life.
Yep.
He always carried free sandwich coupons in his front pocket. So that when he met you for the first time, you got a handshake and you got a free sandwich.
Yeah.
And that's one of the ways he started promoting that business.
Yep.
And
unbelievable.
Never changed.
Yep.
Never changed.
I think most of the time people, when they hear conversations like this, they just like there's really so much you can take away from this. And we've got to wrap up, but I think that a solid community of mentorship and encouragement and all of that stuff in your family, in your business. I guarantee if you talk to Truett Cathy, that's what he says. I guarantee if you talk to the Waltons, that's what they say. Having that environment, that family environment, all of those things are so important, and they really stem out into every piece of your life. But one of the things I love talking with you so much about is business and family. And I feel like we got to a lot of that this episode. I'm definitely gonna have you back on as much as possible.
It's fun
if you would come.
I love to talk.
Okay, great.
And I have opinions.
Hey, well, that's even better. Yes, the less I have to talk, the better too. So that's good. Yeah. Thanks so much for coming. This has been a real blast, and a
lot of fun.
I hope that we can do this again soon.
Yeah, good.
Awesome.
Let's do it.
Okay, sounds good. All right, thanks everybody. See you next time.